This is wrestling's greatest moments.
Hey now, wrestling fans. It's time for another episode of Wrestling's Greatest Moments. Wrestling is full of many what-ifs, including those involving wrestlers who might have become WWF Champion. Sit back as Wrestling's Greatest Moments looks at wrestlers who were supposed to be WWF Champion 1977 to 1982. Before we get started though, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. The end of an era. Bruno Sammartino steps down. In 1977, WWF fans were shocked when heel wrestler superstar Billy Graham defeated Bruno Sammartino for the WWF Championship. This was Bruno's second run with the title, and he'd been just as dominant this time as he'd been during his first reign. The fans were also just as behind him as before, cheering him as he defeated one challenger after another, no matter how tough they were or how low they'd stoop in their efforts to capture the WWF title. Behind the scenes, Bruno's grip on the title was anything but tight. Granted, Sammartino was the company's most beloved babyface and a wrestler who likely could have held the title for decades if he wanted to. The only reason Bruno lost the championship in 1971 was that he was tired of the grind, reluctantly took it off him. When Vince McMahon asked Bruno to come back for a year, he agreed. What happened was different though, according to Bruno. They did keep their word, but it went from 1 year to 4 years until Stan Hansen body slammed me on my head at the Garden and broke my neck. At that point, I told Vince that I had been more than fair with him and that he had to get someone ready. I didn't want to have the responsibility to be featured in all the major clubs. I wanted to pick my shots, and I wanted to leave on top. Vince McMahon Sr. faced one of the biggest challenges in his life as a promoter. Who could he find to replace Bruno Sammartino? Obviously, Sammartino was irreplaceable, but McMahon had to find a successor. According to Bob Backlund, Vince Sr. had many wrestlers to choose from. There's no doubt in my mind that Vince Sr. could have recruited any wrestler from any territory, anywhere in the world, into the WWF. Promise of making that person the next babyface world champion. He could have taken Dusty Rhodes or Steve Keirn out of the Florida territory. He could have had David Von Erich from World Class. He could have had Tommy Rich from Georgia. As fans know, Bob Backlund was chosen for the WWF Championship, but Backlund might have become NWA World Heavyweight Champion instead. Backlund had proved himself during his campaigns in different NWA territories, impressing promoters with his skills, reliability, and ability to draw. Unlike the WWF, the process of selecting a new world champion involved a group. Harley Race described what things looked like in 1976, when the NWA met to decide who would succeed then NWA World Heavyweight Champion Terry Funk. There were 9 members of the championship committee, so you needed a vote of 5 of the 9 to become champion, and that committee didn't have a majority. According to Race, the NWA selection committee was torn between Jack Briscoe, Bob Backlund, and himself. Terry Funk recalls what was one of the biggest roadblocks to Backlund being chosen as NWA champ. The committee was split, not because they didn't like Bobby or because Bobby wasn't drawing or anything like that. They loved his look and his ability to take care of himself and the belt, but Bobby would have had to have been purely a babyface champion. Backlund's inability to convincingly play a heel was a detriment to him serving as NWA World Champion, where he would tour many territories and be called upon to play a heel or a babyface, depending on the circumstances. As we'll see, the All-American Boy's struggle to play a heel wasn't a hindrance for the WWF. When Vince McMahon began to envision the babyface successor to Bruno, he decided on something different than his previously successful formula of babyfaces who appeal to an ethnic group. Instead, he would have an all-American underdog whom fans could root for as he battled various heels. However, who would take this role? Let's look at 2 wrestlers who were reportedly considered. Tony Garea. New Zealand native Tony Garea enjoyed a successful run in the WWF as a tag team specialist, holding the company's tag team championship 4 different times in the 1970s and once in 1980. Garea also enjoyed success as a singles wrestler and had the talent expected for a champion. As noted in the book WWE Legends, Tony was a hit as soon as he began working in the United States. Garea became a sensation in his new home, gaining popularity through his good looks and and repertoire of aerial moves that were quite exciting for that era. Female fans turned him into a heartthrob, and they were well represented in the fan vote that turned him into the 1972 WWF Rookie of the Year. While Guria's focus on tag team wrestling may make it seem unlikely he would have been selected as WWF Champion, that's not so, at least according to WWE Legends. Guria was in consideration at the time to be the WWF's next top title holder. The hated superstar Billy Graham had dethroned San Martino as heavyweight champion, and Guria's name was on the list of those being considered to replace Bruno as the next company flag bearer. Guria wasn't sure of the challenge. I was a little bit nervous when I heard the rumors. I wasn't sure if I could carry the championship. I felt it to be a big responsibility. Tony's trepidation is understandable, as carrying a promotion on your back is a tremendous burden. In Guria's case, he would be following in the footsteps of Bruno Sammartino. Bob Backlund believes Guria was considered, perhaps not by Vince, but by Vince's business partners. In his memoir, Backlund, the two-time WWF champion, recalls his surprise when Vince McMahon Sr. chose him to hold the WWF Championship, thinking that other stars would have been selected. I'm sure they were thinking of in-house guys like Jay Strongbow, Tony Gurria, Ivan Putski, or Bruno's protege Larry Zbyszko. Although Tony Gurria was under consideration, it's unlikely that Vince McMahon Sr. would have chosen him over the other candidates. Gurria had proven wrestling skills and could brawl, which up until Bob Backlund's reign was a key element of the champion's arsenal. His microphone skills were satisfactory for the company at the time, and in reality, the only WWF champion with dazzling microphone skills was heel champion superstar Billy Graham, and Graham's successor Bob Backlund wasn't known for tearing things up on the microphone. Guria's Australian background might have made a difference in McMahon's decision if the company had a noticeable Australian group of fans. Indeed, McMahon's champions Bruno Sammartino and Pedro Morales were valuable because they appealed to Italian-American and Puerto Rican fans. It's difficult to tell how Guria would have fared after superstar Billy Graham's run. Graham was beginning to receive significant shares despite portraying a heel, and some fans were uncertain about the somewhat bland Bob Backlund. Nonetheless, Backlund won fans over and became a successful champion for years, despite bringing a very different style to the championship, that of an all-American underdog whose incredible resiliency and refusal to quit made him an enduring champion. The other question is whether WWF fans would have embraced Guria as a world champion after years of him wrestling in tag team action. One solution to this possible problem would be to follow the same formula that Vince McMahon used with Bob Backlund, give him an incredible singles push and undefeated reign for roughly a year before he finally captured the WWF Championship. Of all the wrestlers on our list, Guria is the biggest unknown in terms of how he would have fared as champion. Ken Patera. Another wrestler who believes he was under consideration is Ken Patera. The Olympic strongman had transitioned from weightlifting to professional wrestling, showing a talent at working as either a babyface or a heel. As Patera recalls, the word was going around that Bruno Sammartino would be dropping the title, and it was standard for the company. He'd lose it to a heel, would serve as a transitional champion, allowing a babyface to win it. The old man more or less had been promising me for some time that I would get a run with the belt at some point. I mean, he never really came out and promised me that in so many words, but it was pretty much the plan for about a year and a half, that I was going to be the one to take it off Bruno when the time came, and that's what everybody thought. When Patera learned that the WWF planned on giving Backlund a 5-year run as a babyface champion, he saw the writing on the wall and left the WWF, eventually returning to win the Intercontinental Championship. Could Patera have served as a transitional champion? While he admits it was never out-and-out promised, it's a point to consider. Patera had mastered the art of getting fans to despise him and could work with any style of opponent in the WWF. He was good on interviews, although he, or anyone else for that matter, couldn't match superstar Billy Graham on promos. However, Patera could actually wrestle. In Patera's case, he believes Vince Sr. chose superstar Graham to be his transitional champion based on the advice of his friend and fellow promoter Eddie Graham. In fact, that's what Vince Sr. told him. Graham proved to be a good draw and had the longest run of any transitional champion at the time. the new kid in town. By the early 1980s, Bob Backlund was going strong as WWF champion. Nonetheless, nothing is set in stone when it comes to championship runs, and Backlund could have been replaced as champion before his 1983 loss to the Iron Sheik. Let's look at the wrestler who was proposed as a possible replacement, Jimmy Superfly Snooka. Jimmy Snooka was a successful competitor dating back to his time in the 1970s when he toured various territories. When Snooka entered the WWF in 1982, fans didn't know what to expect. Snooka was a powerfully built heel who wrestled like a savage and let manager Captain Lou Albano do his talking. Snooka's finisher, the Superfly Splash, is a sight to behold, and the WWF built it up strongly. Enhancement talent often did stretcher jobs after being splashed, leading fans to wonder whether anyone could stop Snooka. By the spring of 1982, it was clear that Snooka was going to challenge for the WWF Championship. Snooka and Backlund's three-match series in Madison Square Garden was a smash success, with fans turned back at the box office. The third and final match in the series featured a steel cage match where Snooka performed his finisher off the top of the steel cage. The move immortalized Snooka, and he achieved national recognition as a video of the death-defying dive made the rounds in various wrestling territories. The Snooka Backlund program was box office gold, and it dominated WWF cards. By the end of the program, something special had happened, as fans had gone from hating Snooka to loving him. In 6 months, Snooka was a babyface, with the fans eager to see more of him. For some fans, a run with the WWF Championships seemed inevitable as well. However, Snooka's personal demons weighed him down, making him an unreliable choice to hold any of the company's championships. According to Bob Backlund, Snooka almost made it though. Toward the end of our series of matches, as things were winding down, Vince Sr. pulled me aside at a television taping and talked to me about Snooka. He asked me straight out whether I thought Jimmy could be the world champion. I told Vince Sr. that Snooka's timing in the ring was as good as anybody's I'd ever worked with in the WWF, and that Jimmy had the look and the ability necessary to be a great champion in the ring. However, Snooka's drug use was well known backstage, and I was concerned for Vince McMahon Sr., his propensity to get stoned. But then, as it always did with Jimmy, our conversation turned to the extracurricular activities that he was involved in, most particularly his propensity to get stoned, and whether, given the reality, Jimmy could be relied upon to hold down the top spot on the card. No matter how good Snooka was in the ring, or how much the fans loved him, Vince McMahon Sr. knew he needed a champion who could show up every night he was scheduled to work and be in the right frame of mind. No matter how good Snooka was in the ring or how much the fans loved him, Vince McMahon Sr. knew he needed a champion who could show up every night he was scheduled to work and be in the right frame of mind to work an entertaining and safe match. It's easy to believe Snooka as WWF champion, and Backlund believes it could have happened. Had it not been for his personal demons, I think Snooka would have ended up with a world title sometime in 1982, either by taking it directly from me or by quickly winning it from a transitional heel champion. As we'll see with another wrestler considered for the WWF Championship, reliability is an essential element for any wrestler, but especially for a champion. What do you think of these potential champions? Do you find any of these stories hard to believe? Share your thoughts in the comment section and let us know if there's any videos you'd like Wrestling's Greatest Moments to cover. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and spread the good news about Wrestling's Greatest Moments, the channel that celebrates the squared circle.